Welcome to part two of the Node Express Handlebars Heroku tutorial. In this part, we're going to use API data and create an API. We'll use a weather API to get weather data in our project, and then we'll hook it all up to a front end. So let's look at a preview of what we're going to build. It's very simple, but it hits all the points of any kind of full stack JavaScript application. So it's a random username generator. Let me refresh. And so if you click generate, it combines some kind of adjective with here. Let me get tally. The tally saves the internet game items off of there. Okay. So if you click generate, it takes a some kind of adjective plus some kind of animal name plus a two-digit number, and randomly selects each of those and combines them into a single username. That's a great one there. And so then if you choose the weather option, by default it doesn't use the weather, but if you choose the weather option, then on the server it will use the weather API and use the weather from the location that you've chosen, and combine that with a animal name and the temperature of the location that you've chosen, and bring that back as a single username. So again, it's an example that hits all the points, yet it's fairly simple to understand and see how they all fit together. So again, so here's the first presentation, and so we'll be starting with the template application that we built in the first tutorial, and then we'll be connecting to weather.gov. We'll be using fetch on the front end and fetch on the back end to move the data around. And here's an overview of what we're going to do. We'll fork the original repository. We'll talk about cores and APIs and Postman and error handling, and creating web forms with Bootstrap and connecting the front end to the back end. And then we'll also spend some time working on the logic of our application. So the first thing you need to do is go to this template and create a fork of it. You can do that right here. You can use the same name, and you'll fork it, and then you'll clone it to your own computer. And so I've already created a fork. It's a little bit complicated if you're forking one of your own projects, but you can Google and figure out how to do that, or you can check my GitHub presentation where I added instructions for that. But anyway, you'll be forking mine, so it won't be an issue. So fork the template project, and then clone it to your own computer, and then we'll start building. So before we dig into all the pieces, let's talk a little bit about cores and APIs. So cross-origin resource sharing, or cores, determines how JavaScript can access resources. So images, data, text files, anything from a web browser. So if you're running JavaScript in a web browser, your script can get resources on its own server, right? The localhost or the davidson.edu, for example. But if your script tries to get data from another server, that's considered a cross-origin request. So this is your origin server, and this is not the origin server, so it's a cross-origin request. And if that server hasn't explicitly enabled that type of request to be allowed, then it will fail. So that's the cores protocol, and it's enforced by only web browsers. So like in the case of trying to get data from multiple sources, like your own project, but as well as, let's say, the weather from the weather.gov API, which we're about to do, it could be a problem trying to access that data from the front end. However, servers don't have this problem. It's only from web browsers. So on the back end, it's no issue. Servers can connect to other servers and get any publicly accessible resource. You will see the CORS issue a lot if you're working with JavaScript. And to see an example of how it works, what we can do is run this little fetch call in a JavaScript console. And so I'm going to, let's see, let me do it from davidson.edu. So now I'm my context, my origin, according to the web browser, is davidson.edu. And so I'm going to try to fetch just the page of Google's homepage and then log the data to the console. And if I hit return, we'll see we'll see the issue. We'll see that it's because it's using fetch, and fetches async and promise based. It says we've got a promise that's pending, and then it ultimately fails because we are making because Google's CORS policy has a no access control origin header, and we can see that header as well as if we go into network and down here at the very bottom, we can look at the request, and we can see that it was not a 200, which is successful, but it was blocked by CORS, and we can see that there was no response. It's not a 200 or a 404. It's just blocked, and you can see the content. Where is it? So I actually don't see it. Oh, they have a strict origin when cross origin. There it is. So that's the that tells us that that CORS is not allowed. And so some websites like GitHub won't even let you make a request from the client across origin. But most servers block a CORS cross origin request. So anyway, so that's important to know because it's a common error that you'll see, and now you know how to deal with it. But more importantly, for like moving data around and displaying data and doing things with data, which is basically like everything in computers. So or at least in network computing. So what are APIs? Application program interfaces provide data and services across the internet. They allow data to be exchanged between websites or between clients and websites. So when you look at an app on your phone, like the Instagram app, you're really you're just looking at the presentation end of all this data that's being provided by the API. So the Instagram server has an API, and it's returning JSON data, which looks a lot like what you see here. And when you click like on something or you upload an image, you're pushing data using the put method to the Instagram API. So the API is really it's the source. It provides the endpoints, which are the URLs. Like here's an endpoint right here on this test, so it receives requests and then it responds with data. And so they're a lot like search engines, just like Google. You make a request, basically a query, and then Google gives you a list of links. And so the difference is that with an API, everything's machine readable. So like in JSON or JavaScript object notation. And so this is a great site that it's JSON placeholder.typicode.com. I think that's how you pronounce that. And so they have a whole bunch of these test endpoints. And so I'm just going to click through a few of these, and they've got some example code, which is really nice. But you can make test requests to their API and see the data that comes back. So like here are the user's requests. And so these are just, a few, like 10 or so fake users with names and emails and addresses, phones, companies, etc. And this is an array of JavaScript objects. So the square brackets tells us it's an array. And then this is a JavaScript object. They're comma separated. So that's an array of objects. And so, yeah. So, and incidentally, I have the JSON viewer extension, which makes that, it kind of like prettifies everything, and allows you to expand nodes and so forth. It's really nice. I highly recommend it. It's linked here in the. So let's talk now about APIs and cores. So like I said earlier, because of cores, you often cannot connect to an API from a web browser. But you can connect to the test site because cores is enabled. And so we can verify that by looking at the network tab again and refreshing the page. And we can see that here's the page itself, users, return status code 304, which I think that's technically a redirect, but it's green and the data's here, so it was successful, even though it's not 200 for some reason. And that let's see here. Trying to find the cores bit of information. The response headers say the content type was JSON data. It's UTF-8 encoded. That means it supports emojis and all the languages. And there, access control, allow credentials. Oh, that's for the sending a login data. Yeah. So that's the same strict origin when cross origin. That's weird that I got this earlier. I did this earlier. Allow control, access control, allow origin. Oh, it's because I ran. Oh, that's what I did wrong. You planned for your demo and then everything. Yeah. So here I pasted it in here so I would remember to do this, and then I didn't do it. So this is a fetch call just like the one I ran with Google a second ago, and I ran on davidson.edu. Yeah, so it makes sense that we're not seeing the problem because we're actually connecting. So we're connecting to the data on the origin, and we're running it on the origin's webpage on the client. So of course my example was not working correctly. So we'll go to the console and we'll do what I did earlier with fetch Google from davidson.edu. Again, a different origin. And this time we'll run the same fetch, but with the different endpoint pointing at JSON placeholder. And again, there's a promise, but this time the promise returned successfully or resolved successfully. And there's all the same data that we just saw in the web browser. And if we go and look down here, we can see the last request that was made on the network of this page, status code 200, which is what I expected to see, and access control, allow origin, and there it is right there. So yeah. And so again, so I'm running JavaScript on the console, but it would be just the same if I was running JavaScript embedded in the davidson.edu webpage or embedded in your own webpage. If you try to access that data and the course is not enabled, you won't be able to get it. So, but if you run it on the back end, then you're cool. So, so let's talk a little deeper about API data now. So we're going to use the weather.gov API. We'll connect and we'll get and use the current weather in our project. So this is the root endpoint, and I do this too. I just have like a basic like status okay or message hello or something that says, hey, the API is functioning, and it doesn't take a lot of resources to just return that. So, and so CORS is technically enabled on the API. On the weather.gov API, but in order to keep all our logic in one place on the back end and provide it as our own API, we're gonna run that on the back end. So we'll do that in a second. So so the weather.gov API asks you, so all of the weather reports are not based on city, they're based on these 2.5 kilometer forecast grid points. And that link is to the documentation. And so basically they want you to supply your latitude and longitude to this endpoint and in this form. So it's so I'll run it now. And notice we're just testing all these APIs right in the web browser in the client, and that works great, especially with this JSON viewer tool. But in a second, I'm going to show you a really great tool for testing APIs. It is called Postman, and we'll get to that in a second. And so here I Googled our launch and Davidson. And I supplied them there with a comma between them, and then I hit that endpoint with our data. And so and then you can go in here and you can see that there's a properties.forecast field, and right here is the endpoint. So now we've got the grid point basically, and it's 116 by 76, and if we'll use that, and if you hit that endpoint, the grid points with the correct grid point, which is Davidson, then it'll actually give you a forecast. And so inside of their properties.periods, there's an array of JavaScript objects, and the first one is the current temperature or the next moment in time. So this afternoon, so it's 2:03, so we're in this afternoon, and this is going to be valid until, so let's see, so it's valid from 2 to 6, and then at 6 o'clock 1824 hour time, it's going to the next prediction will happen. So right now we've got temperature 39 and a chance of light rain, and then there it is, there's our rain. But let's talk about Postman real quick. So Postman, available at postman.com, is you can use it on their website, but I prefer to download the app. I find it really, really handy for testing APIs. The thing about APIs is that when you're making requests to the internet, not everything is a GET request, and so when I made this request, it's a GET request, right? And let me see if I can verify that here. Refresh the page inside of network, and so there's the page, and right there. So my request method is a GET. So with a browser, if you're only using the URL bar, you can only make GET requests. But if you want to set up something that has a form data, then you have to use a post request. So when you click send from the in your form, then and you want to put data into the server and send data up there, you can put it into the URL as they do here. So here it was required that we did the lat and long in the URL. And so they can parse that URL request at that point's endpoint, and then they can do a lookup in their database with that information. But it's more common to use post data, because with get data and the URL encoded data that you can send inside the URL, you have limits. You can only send so much data. The URL bar or the URL get data is limited to a certain amount. So like you couldn't send like I don't know if it's 300 words, but I'm positive that you couldn't send much more than that. It's going to be it's going to have to be URL encoded, so you're going to lose all the formatting. you can't upload images. You can't do mixed types of data like UTF encoded string plus a photograph. You couldn't do that. So you have to have this other format for sending data from a client, and it's post. So it's the other request method. So this is why you need something like Postman, because while you can do get data with and test get requests with your browser, you cannot test post requests unless you actually build out your whole app. And so if you're just working on an API, then it's really good to have just to be able to set your type of request. And so here I've got a collection of API requests for teaching, and you can see here's my weather API request. And this is the one that we just made in the browser, and I click send, and it pulls in the data. It formats it nicely. I can see the raw version. I can see I don't know what that does, but the headers is really nice. It's just like what you see in the DevTools in Chrome. But you can also send other data. You can use this tool to send other data. So in the case of post, I'm basically trying to mimic what a web form would send. And so here, here's the get request to our endpoint where we're going to generate the username in what I was just showing you. And every time I send this, it's going to reply with looks like I've made a mistake in the code. I'll have to fix that when I actually write this demo. But so it's returning the data. But if I wanted to send the weather data, there's really no way to do that from a form unless you're using post. So here I'm sending the city as the city is a key inside of the form URL encoded data in the body of the request, and then I can set the value. And so this is basically allows you to mimic a form. And so the city, is it the city that I think it's called? I think I call it the city index later on. So the city index should be, it's taken a little bit. There it goes. So the city index in our example, which is right here, so that's the first one. It's an array. So Davidson is 0. So if I change this to 0, we should see the same thing that we see in Davidson, which is rain and 39. And so let's go look at that again. And the first period is indeed, ends with the word rain. Temperature is 39. So, okay, so that's Postman. So I think we've talked about enough concepts. Let's start coding. And I'm pre-recording this video for the class, but also for future classes. With the pandemic, it's really hard to it's hard to see where everybody's at because I can't see your screens. And pre-recording the video allows everybody to watch the video in class, but then I can help people who might misunderstand or need some help with something, while everybody else can kind of work at their own pace. So so hopefully it provide a lot more flexibility, and I can just go as fast as I normally would. All right, so let's get this started. So I have the original demo that I built on running on my local host, port 3000, and I have it built over here. However, I duplicated that so that I can basically reconstruct this from scratch. And you can see how I build up the application and how I kind of test each endpoint and work it all together. And I can also, while I'm typing, I can talk about the kind of the code principles or design patterns I'm using, or the different types of async operations that you use in JavaScript. So I'll be referencing that example over there. Okay, so first thing I need to do is so I need to quit running my test, and then I need to, and I've already forked my original template repo and pulled it down to my computer. It's called Sample Node Express Username Generator because it's a long name, because I figure it was the most descriptive. So now I need to move from the original one I made up to cd sample node express username generator, and cool. So now I'm in here. Now if I run this using the same method, which is on my computer npm run start https, because I have an SSL, but you would run npm run start. Okay, so now I've already got an error, and it's because and you'll get this too. It's I keep forgetting to mention it, I guess. But when you clone a new project and you go and look at the source code, so let's go here. Let me do the quick way to do this is just if you're in the repo, you can just type atom period, and it'll open in atom. So this is a direct copy or clone of the template project that I made in the first video, and but the first thing you might notice is that there's no node modules, and indeed, if you read the error, it cannot find the module express. So to fix this, we just say npm I is short for install, and it'll go through, look at the package.json file, download all the modules, install them here, and to the package lock file, it'll save all the specific versions that were saved. And so now I can run, or we can run npm start, and so we're all good. So now when I go back to my localhost, which I was previously running my completed demo, and I hit refresh, now I've got basically a whole new website running on that port now, because I've stopped the other one and started this one. And it's just the template one, which is the cats that we saw before. Okay, so let's get to work now and flesh this thing out. So we have a lot of pieces that we have to add. We have form data, and we have to worry about getting the code to work on the front end. First thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to go and replace the emoji so that I don't get confused. I added this pizza emoji afterwards, and you can find that link right here in the original repo to a favicon generator. The favicon or favorite icon is this image that shows up here, and this one just gives you the pizza, and the pizza emoji, or this one gives you, this one gives you a list of all the emojis, and then you can download whichever one that you like. And so I'm gonna use this one, I think, because it's the funniest. So I'll click download, and now I'll get a zip file, and this essentially contains not only the favicon, which is an ICO file. I think it's like an antiquated Windows file, but it also contains these higher resolution files for Android and Apple and etc. So like if you add a bookmark to your home screen. So I'm going to go back into I'm going to go into my Finder and jump straight to the directory where I keep all that. And in my public folder, you can see I've got all the original favicon or favorite icons, and I'll just add them all here, including the web manifest. In the about, you'll also see that oh, if you look on, this page where you download it, excuse me, there are also some meta tags that you need to add that ahead of your document. And I've already added those and the file names don't change. So I should be able to now just go to my local example and hit refresh, and there it is. I've got the new one. And so let's go. I'm second guessing my umbrella now because it's too small, and I think I want something that looks more like weather, like the sun behind the rain cloud. I think that's or the lightning. Oh, that looks fun. Okay, so we'll use that one. All right, let's do this one more time. I'm fussy, I guess, when it comes to images. So I'll just move those over there, apply to all, replace them all, and then go back here, and I should be able to, I'm not sure that's better, but you know what, I'll take it. So we can move on. Okay, so now we can see all of our updates here. I'm gonna just commit all these to make sure that this is the first commit in forked repo, and I'm just gonna do this and commit and push and just make sure that all this went to the yesterday. Did it go to the right one? I just have to make sure. Public assets. Yeah, 19 seconds. Okay, we're cool. All right. So let's talk code now. All right. So recall that we have that all the routes that are set up here are just the home page, which shows us the cat, and the API, which is a simple hello message. And we can look at it like this, API, and it returns JSON, so it says hello, and it just echoes this object right here. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a new directory and a new file. And if you say a new file, you can do both at the same time. And we're going to add a directory called data. And in here, we're going to have two files. And the first one is going to be words. And here we're just going to get a list of words that we can use to generate the usernames. The first thing we're going to do is just basically make the route to create the user to generate the username, and we'll add all the words in order to generate that name. So let's just get a list of animals, and so here's a list, and I want I just want I need a copy and pastable list. All right, here we go. So let's get tell you what, let's just get all of them. So I'll just start selecting, and I'll scroll down to here and hold down Shift and click again, and it will select them all. And so now I can paste. So this is really, this is going to take some work because we need these to be wrapped in quotes because they're all strings, and we need them to be comma separated. And so there's some great search and replace items in Atom that we can use here, and we can do a what's called a regular expressions search. And so so recall that like animals that start with A and then B and then C, so we don't want that text in there. And I could cut it out 26 times, or I could try to do something a little different. And so I can say animals that start with, and then space, and then I can enter a period and a star, and or not. What's going on? Why didn't that work? It seems like just when I think I'm a regular expressions expert, I just fail. So animals to start with. Oh, did I not select the button? I guess that would make it not work. Okay, so that didn't work. Oh, how about we do A to Z? Like this. And then I think we got to do that as a, I think it looks like that. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. Oh, I've clicked the match case bit button, and I should click the reuse regex button. So that was done. Okay, so now now I've matched all 26 of these, and I can replace them with nothing. And so I'll replace them, and now they're all gone. And so that took care of that. And so I also want to take care of spaces. We don't want any of those. So I'll search for spaces, and there are 461 of those, and we do not want any spaces. So I'll replace all those. And the next thing is that you can search for, not only can you search for spaces, but you can search for other white spaces, or white space. Not white spaces, but white space. And so I'll copy this and I'll paste this. And so I'll select all and then paste and find all. And so essentially what I've done is I've copied the character return, the invisible character return. And so now I've selected basically the line break on each of these. And now I can end the previous word with a quote, add a comma and a space, and start the next string. And now when I hit replace all, it's going to clean this up really nicely for us into basically an array. Oh, and let me go ahead and get the hyphens out of here. I don't think I want those. And I'll get rid of all the hyphens, find all, there are 20 of them and they're gone. Okay. And then we have to go up to the front because there are some empty strings, and we don't want any of those. And I think because I had a couple of line breaks that I left in, we got to remove all those too. So replace all, and so now then I gotta give this set this to an array name, or give this a variable name as well. So I'm going to select them all. In Atom, you can select the whole thing, and then if you type something like a brace or a bracket, it'll wrap them, which is really nice. And so now we're going to make this a module. So we'll say var exports equals module.exports. I talked about modules in the previous video. And so now this is exports.animals. All right, and I add a semicolon to keep things clean, and save it. And now my JS hint linter is satisfied. I've got a nice list of animals, but I also need a list of adjectives. So let's get that. List of adjectives. 228 common adjectives. We'll take that. All right. Looks like it would be easier to copy from another list here. Maybe what I need is just like a really appearance adjectives. You know what? I'm really not that picky, so I'm just gonna paste those and condition adjectives and those and these and these. Okay, good enough. And so now we need to do the same thing, which is what we need to find and replace the carriage return. Oops, gotta copy it. Copy, find in current buffer. There they all are. And then I'm going to replace. If I just hit up, it'll give me the previous ones, and I can replace all. And great, there we go. And so hope I didn't mess up my my animals. No, they look okay. Okay, all right. So I gotta clean this up. So delete that and delete. I wrapped all my other information in here. Okay, and then I can, let's get rid of that search. Okay, you're gonna wrap these all in an array, and exports dot adjectives equals, and add a semicolon, and I'll beautify and get rid of that last one that was added inadvertently, and cool. So it looks like we're good. Now we've got a module that has an adjective and an animal name, and we can import this into our project. So I'm going to make a new one to, so these are our routes. They take care of all the endpoints that, or website pages. But I'm going to make a new file called generator, and that's where I'll do the logic for this application. And the choices that I'm making here are, there's sometimes common choices, and there's sometimes my own personal preference. Like I mentioned in a different video or the previous video, I might have a whole bunch of routes in a large project, and I might put those in separate files. I might have a whole bunch of different middleware, and I keep those in separate files inside of a middleware folder. The choices that I make here are really just based on the kind of the scale of the app and how many files I'm going to have. It's I'm trying to keep the files. The separation of concerns. I have a slide here that kind of describes what I mean by separation of concerns. It's down here in the next section, but it essentially says that like you want to use a dry principle, which is you don't repeat yourself, right? So you try not to repeat any code, and that's so you use function blocks to do that, but you also you also want to keep single elements of your system in meaningful places, and you want to kind of keep them logically organized, and that that's often dependent upon what you're building. And I know I'm not building a super big app, so anyway, so let's talk about this generator. So in the generator, we are going to basically provide a module that will generate, that will contain the methods that generate the username, right? And so we'll do the same thing. We will have to write the export function first. Var exports equals module.exports. And then we can start to export the methods that we want. And so the first one we're going to make is called generate username. And we'll set that equal to an asynchronous function. And I'll use the fat arrow, and then I'll create the statement block. And so here we're going to this will be the method that we call from inside of the endpoint that we're about to add, that will get the data. So let's go ahead and add that endpoint, and this will be API/generate username, and the username inside of the object we return is going to be the data that is returned from the generator. Oh, well, let's come up here and go ahead and add it first. We need to import the module. So we'll say generator equals require from the current directory generator. Oops, wrap that in a string. Okay, and then we'll come down here, and now we can use generator dot generate username. And this is a method call, so it looks like that. And yeah, so we will eventually, oh, and don't add a semicolon because it's in an object. So, so it would be separated by commas. So now we've got a new endpoint, and I'm gonna move the this box over, or this IDE over, so that we can see our terminal and just make sure that it is working as expected and restarting as needed. And this is the same, I've got the same directory open here so that we can install stuff, which we'll do in a second. And so I'll save it, and because we're using the develop or the node bond in our start, every time I save it, it refreshes and runs. So now we can go over here to wherever and I can go and save generate username. And bang, we've got an error already. Wonderful. So let me make that smaller as well. There we go. Okay, so type error, generator.generate username is not a function. So let's go and check that out, see what the problem is. So here I've called it as a function, generator.generate username. I'm importing the module, so that all looks good. So let's look in here. So it's unhappy because oh, we're done with words. It's unhappy because the route here. Let me order these by the kind of the order in which the stack appears. It's unhappy because it's expecting to take the results that were returned from this function and stick them right there. And so we could fix that error by just saying return hello or anything. And when we do and refresh that, now the object, now it's happy. And so we're still not getting exactly what we expect, but in any case, we are returning data from that method, and so now it's getting what it expects to see. And so let's just take a look here. So in this case, we're returning a JSON object, and inside the JSON object, it's going to save a key and username, and generator.generate username should just be a string of text. Oh, I see what the problem is. So we are getting an unexpected result here because it's instead of just putting the word hello, it's giving us a JavaScript object, and we're seeing that because I set this as async. And so if I take that out and refresh, then it is indeed just acting like it's supposed to. So because I took the async out, it's a synchronous function. It's not asynchronous, it's synchronous. So that means that that everything else that's happening in our Express app, all the other millions of users on our awesome project are basically they have to wait because the node event loop is it's waiting for a synchronous event. But because we're going to be connecting to an external API, the weather.gov API, we need to we need to set this as async so that it can wait for any data to come back. However, when we do, it's returning a promise. Like when we saw when I contacted davidson.edu and it said promise, and then it later on gave us the data after the thing came back. So so you set the async here in the function. It's an asynchronous function, but then you also have to acknowledge that it's an asynchronous function by saying await before you make the call to that function, right? And so let me just check my the way that I've written my code to make sure that I'm doing everything as I expected here. And okay, so why am I seeing the error? It's always great when I'm doing a video or I'm doing a demo and I get errors that I don't know how to fix immediately, but it's even better when I'm pre-recording and I get a dumb error that I don't know how to fix immediately. And it's because of something that I'm not expecting. And so yeah, I just brought down the whole server. And let's see what did I do wrong? So I'm requiring the generator. I'm using here, let's just copy and paste. Oh, I know what's going on. So when you use an asynchronous function, when you're creating a promise that is returned from an asynchronous function and then you await from that function, you can only call that from another asynchronous function. It's kind of one of the problems with using async await. And the JS hint error was not giving me that information. It was, so it's just giving me some kind of cryptic stuff here. And once I fix it, then it's happy, but unfortunately the error message was not helpful. So, but that's something to remember, that when you use await in order to write synchronous code that is actually asynchronous, then you have to do it from async. So, okay, so now let's go and refresh our API, and indeed it's working as expected. So again, if we took the await out of here, made that a regular synchronous function by deleting that, and then deleted that, it would do the exact same thing, but it would be synchronous. And this way we can wait on data to return from an API, and then we're good. And once we've got that structure set up, we don't have to think too much about async await and the syntactical sugar or whatever you want to call that you have to add to make sure that works correctly. So let's talk about the generator now. Let's go ahead and instead of returning a dumb string, let's go ahead and get the username we want. So recall that these are both arrays, and as soon as we import the words module, we'll be able to access the array by getting the adjectives. So let's do that. So it'll be words equals require words, and so now if we let's create an adjective and set that equal to words dot adjectives, and we'll just get the first one as a test, and then let's do the same thing with animal, and then let's concatenate them together right here, adjective plus animal, and save and refresh, and wait for it to reboot, and oh, we got an error. Let's see, module not found. So, because it's in the data directory. So if I just add data, save, and then hit refresh, can't be reached. Oh, another error. Words on, well, if you spell if you can't, adjectives, where's the error? Oh, I see. The error is in the generator. It's right here, adjectives. And I'm going to, rather than have to go back to the browser every time, I'm going to create a variable right here. Let username equal generate username, and then I'm going to console.log the the, let's see here. Let's go ahead and do our whole response. So I'm gonna make a new variable called let response equal, and then I'm gonna create the object that has and I'll do it like this. This will be much cleaner. Okay, so I'll just talk about what I've done here. So I'm instead of logging the object in here, I've got the whole object saved inside of this and bound to this this variable name. And so now I can use this and see this in the console and then return the same object to the API. So now if I save and then and refresh, but of course I didn't spell animals correctly. Let me just fix that. Animals. And yeah, there we go. So attractive aardvark is that's the first one and the second one. So two things here. So I want to be able to see this every time I save so that I don't have to flip back and forth, so that I can speed up my development. And note that I'm using Command Tab to move things around. I can also just use my cursor. But and then the other thing is that we want to use the JavaScript function to lower, I think it's, yeah, to lowercase. It's like that. And we'll do that on both of these. And then I'm going to, I'll save that, and then done with words, and I'll come back to this, and let's see, I'm trying to think of a clean way to make this route run every time so that I can just see the work in here. But I think that the easiest thing would be to just come down here and just run it so that I save it. And then console.log it right here. And so, yeah, there it is. So there's our attractive aardvark, and I'll await, but you got to do it inside of an asynchronous function so that it doesn't get mad at you. And what's it mad about now? Name missing in the function declaration. Can I just do it like this? And no, I have to Google anonymous function and run on start. And unfortunately, I can't remember everything in my head, so that is the code I'm looking for. So this function runs as a function closure, which basically means that everything that runs inside of this function is locally scoped, and so I can log my the function call at the very beginning, and we can see right there. So just wanted to be able to see this when I'm building, and I'll comment this out later when I'm done with it. Okay, cool. So we've got now we've got to randomize these. So one really great way to do this is with a separate function, and I like to make a file that to keep track of, I like to put, whenever I make, let me back up. Whenever I make a function that I expect to use in multiple places in my project, I'll put it, I won't put it in a single file. I won't put it in a file where I think I'm going to need it, and then copy and paste it in a different file where I think I'll need it, because that violates the dry principle, the don't repeat yourself principle. And so you don't want to have multiple copies of the same block of code, because if you find a problem with it, and then you update it, and you only update it in one place, then you'll think that all of them are fixed, and they won't be. So it takes, when you have more code, especially duplicate code, it takes longer to read, and it's harder to manage, because you have to go and change it in multiple places. So long story short, I like to make a file that just contains functions. And if you go and look at in every project I've ever built, there's a file called functions, functions.js, functions.py, functions.php, and inside of that you will have something like, it'll be some kind of, depending on what it is, it'll be a module that you import into every file that you need it in, and then you can import it and reuse those as needed. And often you will use capitals so that it stands out as like kind of treating it like it's an object or a class. I'm not a perfect programmer, but it's just but it works for me to remember that this is a list of methods that I'm going to tap into. So we have something called functions, and inside of functions we need to export a function called getRandomInt as an integer, and we are going to int, and we're going to accept a minimum and a maximum integer, and it's a fat arrow function, and we're going to do this, and I'm going to wrap everything in a try-catch block. I like to use try-catch basically in every single function, because what it does is it allows your code to fail gracefully. So the try block will attempt to try to run some code, and and if that code fails, the catch block will catch it with an error message that's thrown by JavaScript. And so you can build this into your logic, into your program logic, and you can just use it for error checking when you're running your program. Oops. So here, this is the console error function that allows me to see the error, to catch it and see it, and give me a nice like big block of, instead of just failing silently, it'll catch it and then spit out the error, and I can at least go and try to find it. And then it also just doesn't, because it's catching the error, it doesn't just like stop your program and it just like fall apart, right? It gracefully catches it and then moves on. Anyway, we're basically going to get a random number between the max and the min, and so we'll do that by adding the min back in here. Okay. So what this does is it will return a random number inclusive of the minimum and the maximum. Okay. And so now we can use this, and because we're going to need this in several places to get adjectives and animals and etc. And so we're going to say the adjective equals word.adjectives, and then we'll say functions get random ints, and then we're going to go between the 0 index and the length of the index, which will look like that. And if I shrink it down, will it wrap nicely? Oh, well, it's not gonna. So that is that. So let's take that block and put it right here and replace adjectives with animals, and let's save that and run it, and hit space and save it and run it again. Cool. So now we've got clumsy gibbon and lively Komodo dragon. So indeed, it's working correctly. Now let's get the number. and we'll use the same tool, the functions.getRandomInt, but this time we're going to get a number between 0 and 9, and this will be the number, and we want a 2-digit number, so we're going to add, and then I'll use, why don't we wrap it in a string here, so I'll convert the type, because what'll happen is if the first one is 0, it won't be a 2-digit number, it'll be a single-digit number, because the operator will add 2 numbers together. But if I convert them to strings first, then it'll concatenate them by default. And then let's add that to the end of our return value, and we can see, we'll just save this a couple more times and see what we got. So we got muscular Quetzal, never heard of that animal, and we've got a bewildered Galapagos tortoise, 16, and a happy Beddington Terrier, 76. Okay, cool. So we basically have set up the core of our API, and we can run it here as well. An ugly snail, nervous quail. I don't know what a wolfie is. Skinny flukefish. Uh-oh, we've got some characters that we don't want. So I'm gonna go back to our Words document and just clean that up one more time. How many of those parentheses? There are 8. So let's search for, let's see, how do we do this? We search for anything that has an open and closed parentheses plus anything in between. And then I think we need to wrap it all in a, yes. So let's find, oh, it's treating it as a list instead. You know what? I'm just going to do this by hand because there are only 7 of them. Oops. Undo those so I can actually go and find them. Amazon River Dolphin, or I'm going to stick with Pink Dolphin. And, oh, were there only 2? I guess so. Okay, cool. All right, so let's keep running this. A kind lamprey 57, flabby. I don't know what that is. A Malayan civet. Oh yeah, civet. Okay, cool. So now we've got the back end. Let's go ahead and work on the front end. And for that, we'll need to go and we'll go back to the page, and this is what it looks like now. But we are going to we're going to go into our layouts or our views, our home view, and we are going to we're going to delete all this, and we are going to we're going to use Bootstrap to I've got a link here to the code. We're gonna just copy and paste a we don't need the Hello World Bootstrap. We need their forms examples. So I just went to Bootstrap 5 and clicked on Overview inside of Forms, and so I've got an example here. So I'm just going to copy and paste this into the project, and then I'll beautify it so it's nice and easy to look at. And let's see, so we don't need the password. Recall that the one we just copied had a password in it and a checkbox. And we don't want the password or the checkbox. We are going to eventually add a drop down, but right now we're just going to do the form. So this first HTML element is for the label, and we need to rename it. And let me just double check my my previous documents here so that I can make sure that I match the all the field names correctly. So this is this label for username will expect to point at the ID username, and the input is going to be a text type instead of an email. And we're not going to have a label on it. And I'm going to put click generate to get a new username. And then down here, we will say generate. This will be the generate button. And then it's a type submit, which is good. And we'll add a little space up above it. And then I'm just checking my my previous work over here to make sure. Oh, and it's not email help, it's username help. Okay, let's go check that out. Right there. Great. So you click generate and note that the default form behavior is that the page refreshes, and you can see that we've got our middleware telling us that the new that indeed that these files were pulled from the server. So we need to go and control this inside of our main.js file. So this is what we left in it when we did the first tutorial, and so now we need to we're going to use jQuery, and we're going to listen for generate username when the generate username is form is submitted. So I need to add that ID into the handlebars. So ID generate. So now this form has the ID generate username, and when the submit button or any submit button inside of this form is clicked or invoked somehow, then this jQuery selector will and submit listener will know about that, and this will be an asynchronous function that we're going to add here because we are going to be waiting for data from a remote source, so we have to make sure that it has time to reply, and okay. So the first thing we need to do, note that I put an E here. So when you do an anonymous function as a callback, which is what this is, in a method from jQuery, if there's an error, or I'm sorry, the event itself is stored inside of here. And so what we need to do is on the event that's stored in the E variable, we need to prevent default. And so what that does is that disallows the page from refreshing when I hit generate. And so previously, see, it tried to do a submit. And so now if I click generate, the page no longer refreshes. And this is what we want. We don't want the page to refresh. We want it to dynamically go out and get new data from the API asynchronously to return that without refreshing the page and having to reload all the elements. There's not much of this page, but that's still the desired behavior is to have things happening under the hood to make it feel like a real application that's responsive. You know, if it's running on your computer, it feels like an application, and like things happen immediately, right? You don't have to wait for like spinning wheels and images to reload and et cetera, et cetera. So one of the benefits of working with asynchronous JavaScript. Okay, cool. So now what we need to do is we need to go out and get that data from that API that we made. And incidentally, so there are really two different things running inside of our project. We have the website where we have a JavaScript running in the client end, the public side where the people see, and then we have the API. And this terminal is running the project, which allows the whole thing to work, but this file is going to be contacting the API endpoints that are constructed by these files. But keep in mind that they're the same project, so you can actually use content between them. But when they're running on for the user, this one is in the client, and this one is making up the API and building the dynamic pages of the website. And so, and so this is typical. This is typically how you would construct a project like this. So, but because we are testing locally on localhost, but then we're going to publish on Heroku at an actual URL, we need to accommodate the fact that we have two different that there could be two potential domain names that are the base URL. So it could be localhost :3000/API, or it could be the full name .heroku.com/API. And so we're going to get the location, the window.location. And so this runs inside of the if you run this in a console, and you run window location, you'll see that you get like this nice object that will return the location right there. Window.location.href is going to be the current URL this thing is running at. If you ran this, if you were at Google and you ran this exact same thing, then it's going to give you google.com. Okay, so let's it's window.location.href, and I should update that in my original. Cool. So now we need to now we're going to get the actual, we're going to store the actual URL that we're going to inside of the function by concatenating the base URL, which it changes, and the API endpoint, which is API/generate username. And cool. So, and then we are going to create a request object. So this is so we're going to use fetch on the front end to get, and fetch is built into the JavaScript browser environment, so it'll work on its own. But fetch by default, recall that the fetch structure, which was I think we can find like an example in the right here, the JSON. Yeah, there it is. This is the like a basic fetch example, and it is here, let me comment this out. It is by default, it has a single URL, and then it takes the response, converts it to JSON, and then it logs the JSON object. By default, fetch is only uses the get method, and so we're going to create an object up here where we can construct the request and have control over a few details of the request. And then we'll use that request along with our URL and the request to make the request to our API. And we're doing this because we need to set we need to change the method. We're going to change it from get to post. And this will allow us to send data in the body of the request from the form element itself. And the other thing is that we want to get the data from the body and stringify it so that it's no longer an object. It's a string of data so that it can be transferred. So basically, it's a serialization, deserialization process. and then we need to set the headers on our request to say that we are going to accept. We want JSON data from the server, and that we're going to our content type that we're sending is going to be of the same type, which is application JSON. All right, so let's go ahead and add the variable for the body too, even though we're just going to test the API just for the basics now, and then we'll add in the dropdown in a little bit. But let's go ahead and add in. So we're going to use a comma to assign to create multiple variables. So URL is this, and body it's going to be a JSON object, and we are going to store the city index in it. The city index will be the item that is chosen out of the options in the dropdown, and the city index is going to be null by default, and because we're setting it to null, we'll be able to test later on to see if it's set. If city on the API end will say if city index does not equal null, then we'll know that the user has chosen a weather option, and if it is null, we'll know that we'll just give them the default, which is that we're not going to use the weather. Cool. So let's go and test this now, and right here, and we'll refresh this. And when I click generate, it's not going to work incorrectly for a couple reasons, because I have not I'm using an asynchronous function, but I'm not await. I'm not using await, and I also haven't added something that actually sticks that the response back into there. So so let's see. So just like we did a couple weeks ago in class, rather than a single line of code, we actually need to add a statement block. And so rather than just logging this, we have to return the JSON field that we want. So we're going to return JSON.username, which is the field that we're waiting on. And then because this is an asynchronous function, we also have to return, let's see, we have to, where's there, I think there's a, okay, no, I was wrong. So we will, we're not going to return it here. We're going to, I think the field is called username, and it that's the ID of it, and we'll set it's a web form, so we have to set the value equal to JSON.username. And let me just check here to see if I've got any other problems with my code. Okay. And so let's refresh that, and I'll click generate, and note we've still got this promise error. So now I have to remember when I built the demo that I encountered this error, and now I have to remember what I did to fix it. And so I'm just going to look over here at my code and see what I did, because it should, oh, you know what we should do is to go ahead and log. One way to fix this is to go ahead and log the response itself, because it's possible that there's an error in something I set up here. So I will log the response right here on this line. Oh, and refresh. So what happened? Let's see. So here is the whole response that came back from our API. So it's not just the data that we want, but it's the whole response. And we can see that we've got a 404. So it's not the front end code that's a problem. It's not that an asynchronous issue. It's that for some reason, this is generating a 404. So let me open that up and run it. And that doesn't look like a 404 to me. It looks like it's working great. So what's going on here? Let's see. The URL. Oh, I recall now what is the problem. So let me undo that stuff. Okay. So recall that I said we're using this special request object so we can send data. And we're using the post method. Well, on our routes, we are still using get. And so I'm going to, now if I change that to get or to post and I hit refresh or save, and then I try to go look at I try to go look at this try to make a get request through the browser, it won't work because that get endpoint doesn't exist. This only accepts posts now. But if I come back and I hit generate, refresh, and it works. And so that was our problem, that we were still accessing that in the same way. So what to do? Let's copy and paste. And how did I handle this when I built it? Routes. And yeah, so I have a get that's a simple endpoint. So it's just this piece right here, await generator.username, and instead of putting it into its own object. And let's just go back to that. So so this is what I just did. So I'm gonna copy this, paste it down here, change that to post, and then I'm gonna come back up here and I'm going to leave that at get, because they're basically doing the same thing, whether I store it into a separate object so that I can log it and then send it back, or like in this in my actual demo that I made previously, or I just send it directly back like that. They're doing the same thing. So I'm gonna leave it as this, and now this will continue to work. Note that I don't have to refresh the front end because I didn't make any changes. I just made changes to the API. And then if I hit forward and check the endpoint for the username, it works on its own too. Now, when we start to add the weather data in here, we'll have to only do it in post because we will need data that's supplied by the user. But we won't add that to the get because you can't send the data via a URL bar. Okay, you know what? I think I'm going to end the video right now because it's been about an hour. So I guess I'm making 3 of these. So this video is based only on setting up the API and connecting to that data in the foreground and setting up this this lovely generator. And I'll stop this video and then I'll make another one to finish this out and add the weather data.